What is up, everybody? This is Matthew Sabatine, the host of The Common Caveat, and I am prepared to bring you another episode today to help you navigate the crossroads between the Christian faith, science, and the human experience. So what is today's topic, everybody? Well, this topic is about circadian rhythms and timekeepers among microorganisms that are widespread on the Earth, and how that relates to cognition, consciousness, and God, which is going to be the framework I'm going to use today to argue against a popular claim that our universe is unconscious, godless, and indifferent to human affairs. I also want to bring into this Genesis 1:27, which says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." Most of what I know about timekeeping and decision-making for this episode comes from an article written in 2022 and published by the Royal Society titled "Timekeeping and Decision-Making in Living Cells." But before I get into that, I want to quote something from Richard Dawkins, who is a famous prominent atheist in the 21st and 20th centuries, who also does well at representing the naturalistic reductionistic worldview. He said, quote, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Such a naturalistic, reductionist worldview must assume that cells have no purposeful design throughout their intricate communication. There is no cosmic plan behind homeostasis, which is the process of maintaining internal stability. All adaptations to change occur without direction. Purposelessness is the base beneath all reproductive activity accomplished by the conversion of nutrients into energy, removal of waste products, the transcription of RNA from DNA, the translation of proteins from RNA, and the expansion and maturation of cells that are specialized with specific functions. We are expected here to see blind and mindless watchmakers in the interconnected series of on-off switches and rhythmic behaviors, enabling genes and proteins to interact. It is assumed that the timekeeping accomplished by biological oscillators and synchronizers is done with pitiless indifference to the accomplishment of the task, even though we regularly see life stubbornly striving to survive. Random chance is believed to characterize these complex networks of molecular interactions that can haphazardly fuse together cooperative and contradictory signals and cues, but still somehow magically, and dare I say magically, hit their target every time. Well, not every time, but just enough to contribute to a world that appears stable enough for you and I to walk and swim around in an ocean, in spite of all the reported dangers, like sharks. And if you're on land, tigers, bears, oh my. Well, the struggles of life that make it feel so fragile and tragic can make us overlook life's fortitude that seems so miraculous. Gene expression, metabolism, and cell growth can't continue without the autonomous pathways that transmit signals from the cell's exterior to its interior. The intensity and time span of these signals has an analog nature, which means continuous and graded, that is fine-tuning the signaling with a sophistication different from the binary on-off discrete steps of digital signaling. Many different signaling pathways can have a crosstalk and parallel processing that allow the integration of information from various sources, all of which contribute to the complexity of cellular behavior. That holistic perspective shines a light on the interdependence of the parts within the larger system, which allows us to see God's handiwork, as opposed to the naturalistic reductionism that wants to define the parts only in the context of isolation. cognition. When I was an atheist committed to naturalistic reductionism, I probably would have argued against God or a designer by mentioning the stochastic or random fluctuations happening within a finite number of molecules that have chance collisions in outcomes that are devoid of certainty, further introducing noise into the cellular processes. The limited number of molecules can lead to significant variations and sensitivity to fluctuations. Should this probabilistic picture serve as evidence against the predetermined order of a creator, or is stochasticity and randomness just a tool used by the creator to bring order, diversity, and complexity out of chaos? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Perhaps if we embrace stochasticity and randomness as a foundation, we then can't remain logically consistent in using biological determinism to argue against things such as free will. But I digress. Perhaps the stochastic fluctuations among the scarcity of molecules in such tiny proportions of space subtracts from the seamless magic of the autonomous analog nature of the cellular information processing systems, or IPSs. Even in spite of that, the IPSs responses still gain noteworthy success in survival, growth, repair, and reproduction of cells. After all, you are still here listening to this podcast, even in spite of whatever physical catastrophes you may be facing. If I were an atheist, perhaps I would try to make it seem that God's design is poor and stupid by drawing attention to abnormalities such as DNA damage, unreplicated DNA, or changes in the mitochondrial outer membrane permeability, which is the passage of substances into and out of the mitochondria. But then I would have to ignore the cellular sensors and cell cycle checkpoints involved in DNA repair, the chaperone proteins guaranteeing structural soundness for mitochondria, and the apoptosis, which is the programmed cell death that occurs when the cell is unfixable. In other words, God can fix errors in his design, even if it is evolved over millions upon millions of years. So based on the Royal Society's 2022 article that I mentioned earlier, I want to highlight circadian rhythms, which appears to me as a strange feature of our universe in light of how our world's finest spokespeople for science and atheism want to continue alleging that the evolution of our universe is unconscious, mindless, undesigned, purposeless, and ultimately godless. Even if the timekeeping of these biological clocks is a metaphor, it seems quite inconsistent with the naturalistic reductionism that wants to exclude any form of anthropomorphism and designer from the story of evolution. Quanta magazine published an article covering some awesome discoveries made in 2023. One of them was, quote, how life keeps time. Of course, the author is not trying to say that life is literally using a metronome, nor counting seconds and minutes, but is akin to calendars to keep their developmental processes on track, end quote. Long before modern timekeeping via technology, various organisms evolved to have circadian rhythms as survival adaptations for synchronizing sleep-wake routines and metabolic processes with day-night cycles. The author of that article, Hannah Waters, seems to express ideas that are compatible with the Royal Society's article I cited earlier. The pace is set by biochemical reactions and gene expression underlying the metabolic processes that are also, quote, organized fundamentally by the mitochondria, which may very well serve dual roles as the complex cell's timekeeper and power source, end quote. Painstaking lab work has zeroed in on the organizer, that being the energy-producing, oxygenating powerhouse of the cell called the mitochondria. And stem cell technologies have stumbled upon the, quote, developmental tempo, end quote. Perhaps I would be less inclined to find God's design in this feature of nature if it were exclusive to only humans. But the painstaking lab work has been, quote, focusing on different species and systems, end quote. Apparently, the ubiquity of circadian rhythms has already been known, as the National Institute of General Medical Sciences states, Quote, most living things have circadian rhythms, including animals, plants, and microorganisms. In humans, nearly every tissue and organ has its own circadian rhythm, and collectively they are tuned to the daily cycle of day and night, end quote. These organisms, such as bacteria, archaea, fungi, protists, and viruses, must be mind-bogglingly populous in every ecosystem, amounting to a presence on Earth that seems to parallel a kind of omnipresence. To be more precise, the principal clock genes, such as per1, per2, cry1, cry2, clock, bmol1, rev, erb A, and roar A, have been found everywhere, from cyanobacteria to mammals. These same principal clock genes that are involved in your sleep, your metabolism, and your immune functions are also regulating the expression of genes in other non-human microorganisms via a complex network of feedback loops. A significant difference between them and you is that your master clock is in your brain. This master clock is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a structure shaped like wings in the hypothalamus found at the base of the brain. Cry1, per2, and rev erb A is a three-part input-output loop, identified as a key source of oscillations in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Circadian rhythms allow species to adapt to the Earth's rotation. That requires plenty of order and not random chaos, if you ask me. Nervous systems are responsible for organisms' preservation of circadian rhythms. Their circadian rhythms influence functions associated with goal-oriented behavior, tied to abilities for suppressing impulsive responses, resisting distractions, holding and manipulating information for cognitive tasks, efficiently switching between tasks, and the sustaining of attention and vigilance over time, particularly involving motor responses. It is as if the circadian rhythms have something like a brain. And simply stating that, quote, circadian rhythms are considered a masterstroke of natural selection, end quote, will not do much to support the impression that it is a mindless process of blind chance and indifference. So if circadian rhythms involve timekeeping, then the circadian rhythms that are ubiquitous on Earth amount to our Earth functioning like a gigantic brain. And why would that brain not be conscious? Timekeeping is the ability to perceive, measure, and organize time through the use of memory, attention, and estimation of temporal intervals. Since such a thing is considered to be a human ability, it is nearly impossible to assign it to non-human entities without personifying nature. So whether it is or is not literally timekeeping, this anthropomorphic term that is used in replacement of a better alternative tells me that nature has a parallel with a human ability that is a cognitive function linked to consciousness. This exemplifies how consciousness might be widespread throughout our Earth, implying a further parallel with the premise that there is a universal mind, a creator, or a purposeful design. Humans have brains. Circadian rhythms are nearly omnipresent throughout the Earth and behave as if they have something like a brain. This is a parallel between us and nature, and perhaps some would like to see this as consistent with pantheism, which tries to allege that divinity is identical with the universe. But why not instead see this as consistent with Genesis 1:27, stating that God made men and women in his image? Though some may want to say I am making a speculative interpretation, I think science can support my philosophical and metaphysical argument about biological timekeeping, consciousness, and God. I am aware that the link between circadian rhythms and consciousness in simpler organisms remains a topic of discussion among scientists, and that's why I would like to encourage all of us to continue this discussion. And to lastly conclude this episode, I just want to reiterate Genesis 1:27, saying, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." Thank you for watching this episode today. Thank you for being here with me. Please hit that subscribe button, like, and hit the bell. Have a wonderful day.